Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 24, Why Black Lives Matter, with our guest via Skype, Guy S. Johnson. Hey, Guy, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Well, hey, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here today.
Awesome. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Okay, gosh. I always get flustered when people ask me to tell them. Okay, so I'm Guy Johnson. I am a preacher. I am a teacher. I'm a singer. I like to think of myself as a scholar, kind of an activist, a proud adoptive parent of 2 kids who are absolutely amazing. I always say I am partner to 1, father to 2, uncle to 4, and friend to many.
Awesome.
I currently serve as the pastoral associate, which is a fancy term for assistant pastor that's not ordained at the Grace United Church of Christ in Frederick, Maryland, where the pastor, slow down, Guy, where the pastor is the Reverend Dr. Robert Akbar Taylor. Shout out to Pastor Rob. Yay.
Awesome.
And our church is an open and affirming congregation. We were actually the first O&A in Maryland.
Wow.
And just a small congregation, but historical, a bunch of amazing people. And not only is it an amazing church, it's even more amazing because I call us the Ivory Snow Church because it's 99.44% white.
Oh, wow.
And then I show up. So
awesome.
And I'm not quite Ivory Snow material. So I graduated from the Lancaster Theological Seminary in Lancaster, PA, back in May of this year at 2014. Gosh. And I'm really, other than being outspoken and a little nuts, I'm a boring person.
I don't think so. I mean, you're doing ministry, and you're doing ministry in an area that's really known for, in the southern part of the East Coast, in that area, the start of where the South is, at least, I grew up in New Hampshire, so that's where the South starts for me.
You're from New Hampshire.
I am.
I literally, it's funny because I go to church in Maryland, 20 miles south of the Mason-Dixon line. I live in Virginia, approximately 1 mile from Maryland. So I am in the upper South. And to a northerner, it's the South. To a southerner, it's the North, hence living in the mid-Atlantic.
Right.
It is so interesting. Where we live in Virginia is literally on the dividing line between progressive and conservative. From my house, I can literally see across a highway and know that across the highway, most of the people vote in the complete opposite direction that I do. And that's less than a mile away is the dividing line between red and blue.
Wow.
So we are really, really purple where I live. So it's a wonderful place to live because you get the disparity of voices, but it's a horrible place to live because less than a mile away, I've got people who are fighting to make sure that people like me, people who are gay, people who are of color, the disabled, all those marginalized communities stay marginalized.
Right.
And I'm not saying that everyone who lives west of the highway wants people marginalized, but they vote, our new representative of Congress wants people like me to be marginalized. So I can only go with what I know and what I see.
Right. And it's kind of a weird dichotomy because I've been down there a couple of times, and I drove through there once when I was moving out here. And, I don't know all of how it's like to live there, obviously, because I haven't. But, my dad grew up in that area, too. He grew up in Maryland. And, just working out the dichotomy with him, there are times where I'm like, Dad, the picture you just posted on Facebook is racist, dear. I'm like, your Maryland showing. That's kind of the joke in our family. But, it seems like from what you've described that is kind of true, like that happens.
Oh my God! So we live in Northern Virginia. We literally live. If I were to climb to the roof of our house, I can see the state of Maryland from my house. I literally live up less than a mile from the Potomac River, and I would drive to Lancaster from Northern Virginia, and I'd see stars and bars all along the route.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, and that included being north of the Mason-Dixon line in Pennsylvania.
Right.
So it is a very interesting place to live. Very interesting.
So what has it been like recently, especially with all the stuff around Ferguson and then all the protests in both New York City and Oakland and all over? What has it been like recently?
So part of my struggle is I attend a church where my pastor is an openly gay man, and he's married to a police officer.
Oh my.
Yeah. So we're having these discussions, the three of us, about how social protest and social justice intersect with the police and law enforcement. And it becomes really interesting because, again, I love my pastor. He's hilarious and he's a wonderful dude, but he's like, I can see from a social justice perspective what you're saying, guy, but I'm married to this cop, so I can see what he's saying. And I, of course, can see both sides as well. And I'm not saying that, so it's very interesting for me to be in this space at this time to figure out how Ferguson and how New York City and how, these other small towns are reacting to what is unfortunately a pattern of misconduct by certain members of the law enforcement community. Mm-hmm. For me, I tell people I'm a check writing gay. I'm not a flag waving gay.
Right.
Which is very interesting. Right. I am a check writing gay. You need some check writing gays. Yeah. And the reason why I am not a flag waving marching gay 90% of the time is because if I walk up on the wrong police officer, I might not make it home that night. Right.
Exactly.
And, my partner and I have a life, and I want to make sure that our lives, I want to make sure we have 25 years together. We're coming up on 10, so I need to give him at least 15 more before I start going out trying to protest and, have him come bail me out of jail. But it's interesting because I'm having now these theological conversations with other pastors, teachers, theologians about, for example, this whole Black Lives Matter thing. Mm-hmm. And so actually right before we started talking, I had written a response to my New Testament professor's something on Facebook that he had written. And I basically said, because it was in response to someone saying, all lives matter to God. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I don't question that all lives might matter to God. But from where I sit as a man of color in the United States, where historically we have been looked at as 3/5 of a person, mm-hmm. historically where our bodies have been beaten, bruised, and burned, not only, in sight of, but sanctioned by the government, mm-hmm. and the church. In a country where, and the church, and, and in a country where Southern trees truly do present strange fruit.
Right.
While all lives may matter to God, I can't say that all lives matter, that all Black and brown lives matter to the majority of people who hold power in this country. Mm-hmm. And to my fellow theologians, I said, we will believe the story that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we conveniently forget about Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah, that the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon, Isaiah, Ezekiel, who saw the wheel in the middle of the wheel. We believe that God, smote a whole bunch of Egyptians who were white, according to Ridley Scott. That's a whole nother.
Oh, don't get me started on the whitewashing of the Bible. Oh, that's another whole thing.
That's an hour conversation.
That's another conversation between you and me, I think.
Yes, that's we're gonna take that offline. But
no, we can do another show.
Yay! The God, this God smote Egyptians and caused a sea to divide itself in half and present dry land to these people that were being oppressed, that the Egyptians, who were white, according to Ridley Scott, would not release. We have no scientific evidence to prove that, but we will believe that. We will fight about that. We will condemn somebody to hell over that. We will sell our mother down the river over that story. And we have no evidence to prove that it is real or that it happened, but we will ignore what we see in front of us day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, moment by moment. We can see that there's an inequity in how brown and black lives are treated versus how white lives are treated.
Yeah.
We won't believe that which we see.
Yeah.
And we have evidence of, and we see it continually. And from where I sit, black and brown lives may matter to God. They only matter to God if you are an Israelite, because if you're a Canaanite or a Jebusite or an Amalekite, God has decreed that you need to be slain.
Right.
And not just you slain, but you slain, your wives slain, your children slain, your cattle slain, burn, baby, burn. So from where I sit, if you look at it as a Canaanite, all lives don't matter to God. Mm-hmm. And I know what it is. I know what it is to look at the Bible from being a Canaanite or an Amalekite. I know what it is to have the church say, well, yes, if you just believe in our God, all will be well. But until then, you are still a Negro and we are still going to treat you badly. Right. Now, go sit up in the balcony and give us 10% of your money that you don't have. Amen.
Yeah, go sit up there and be a nice little black person and do what we tell you.
And do what we tell you. Exactly.
Yeah. Which it boggles my mind because, I've seen the same stuff too. And, I'm trying to explain to some of the white friends that I have, it's like, this is not, in general, this isn't about you. This is about the people of color.
Right.
In a system that destroys them.
Yes, that was set up to destroy us.
Yeah, it's basically slavery never left. I mean, you just have to look at our prison system right now. It's all slavery.
Yeah. Oh, so it's amazing. So Greg Carey was my New Testament professor at Lancaster, and so Greg is an apocalyptic scholar. It's up, the apocalypse is what he is, his stock in trade.
Yeah,
and he's also
I have
from
an interest
Alabama.
in that too, actually.
Okay, so if you've not read any Greg Carey, read some Greg Carey. Amazing, just a nice dude. He's Southern. He's from Alabama. I'm originally from Georgia. So Greg and I have a longstanding rivalry. He's an Auburn fan. I'm an Alabama fan. So I can forgive him. I can forgive him for everything but that, almost. But in the midst of all of this, I will never forget that he told us a story when we were in class, and he said, his father had a friend named, I think his name was Mr. Sam. And Mr. Sam called Dr. Carey's father, Mr. whatever his name, or his grandfather, I'm sorry, Mr. whatever his name was, blah, 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 blah. And so when Greg decided he was trying to figure out to go to school, Mr. Sam said, I will help you go to, if you want to go to school X place, I will, tell me where you want to go to school. And so Greg asked his grandfather, what does Mr. Sam do? And Mr. Sam, who called Dr. Carey's grandfather, let's say Mr. Bob, he's like, he is the dean of the medical school at blah, blah, blah in Chicago, kind of thing. And I totally had the cat by the ass on this one, I'm sure. But that's the basis of the story is in Alabama, he was boy.
Right.
In Chicago, he was Dr. whomever, dean of, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So I tell that story to reinforce that this country and the way the criminal justice system has been set up, the way economic development has been set up, the way our children get social cues and learn social norms has been set up where our children are at a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
From the start. You know, I did not pick up a golf club until I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it was by choice because my father played golf, my grandfather played golf. I was in marching band and in love with boys. So that was a whole nother set of issues. But when I finally picked up a golf club, I then understood how to buy into the social interactions that go into golf and how you can make a deal on the golf course, or, you know, you may not play. I am horrible at golf. I am horrible. But I figured out how to, you know, be horrible in golf, drink a beer, and make a deal walking down a fairway.
Right.
I didn't get that skill until I was 25. Some of my colleagues had that skill at 12, which gave them twice as much life experience as I had when I finally figured out how to make it work. And that's because our children are not taught that. Our children don't have access to golf courses.
Well, no. It's only really been since Tiger Woods came on the scene that, you know, golf courses really had to look at the segregation policies.
So my daddy, I was born in Atlanta. I was raised in Augusta. Augusta, Georgia is the home of the Masters. The house that my daddy was born in is approximately 250 yards from the back gate of Augusta National. I have no excuse for not being a golf baby. You know, Augusta becomes golf central around Easter, so I have no excuse. But even with all of that, up until approximately 15 years ago, there had never been a black male member of Augusta National. There still is not a female black male member. Neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But, right. You know, much less, you know, generally, a factoid, the chairman of IBM is generally extended an invitation to be a member of Augusta National. If I'm not mistaken, IBM had a female chairwoman recently.
Right.
Said invitation was not extended to her.
Gee, funny that.
Imagine that, you know.
Yeah.
So it's so much more than just Black Lives Matter. It's Black lives holistically matter. You know, if we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, and we have to talk about the primary school to prison pipeline. If we're going to talk about Black Lives Mattering, you know, if we're going to talk about that, we have to talk about the systematic inequities that occur in economics. If we're going to talk about Black Lives Mattering, we have to talk about how in some communities in this country, you have to drive 30 minutes to get a fresh tomato. And this is coming from somebody who hates fresh tomatoes. The fact that or that in some communities, you have children who are going to bed hungry every night, or at least every other night, in a country that throws away more food than is acceptable in any way, shape, or form. You want to talk about Black and Brown lives mattering? Let's talk about all of that. Let's talk about how inner city schools are so woefully underfunded that children can barely get out of school reading. And that's not just because they can't read, it's because the materials are so out of date and the school buildings are so dilapidated and the children are coming to school hungry, and our congressmen and women are cutting funding for education and food stamps. If we're going to talk about how Black lives matter, we can't just talk about Black bodies mattering.
Right.
We have to talk about we have to talk about the entire system of what it means to have Black Lives Matter.
Well, I think that is a problem in progressive circles, is that, you know, they get kind of myopic about different topics. So, like, you know, I've seen people really focusing on the criminal justice system, people focusing on poverty. And while, you know, it's good to focus on certain things, and, you know, it makes it easier to kind of compartmentalize, do things, because, you know, you can't save the whole world at once, you know, at least I've learned that. And it's frustrating, but I can't wave my magic wand and make everything better.
Right.
But, we do have to be mindful. And I think especially as clergy, being really mindful about the whole system and how the whole system is broken.
I lived in Chicago for a decade. I went to college there and stayed a couple years afterwards. And I attended the Trinity United Church of Christ, where the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. is the pastor emeritus, currently pastored by Dr. Otis Moss III, who is phenomenal. And I told you I'm going to name drop all night. So part of going to Lancaster is it's a UCC school. Right. So a lot of UCC heavyweights come through. And so Dr. Wright came through and he and I were having a conversation, and it wasn't a guest lecturist student conversation. It was pastor parishioner conversation, because he still considers me one of his children. Right, I still am. And so he said something that just kind of blew my mind. He said, prophets don't get to choose what they prophesy about.
True.
You don't get to choose what you are prophetic about. You can't say that you are a prophet only about women's issues and neglect the subjugation of GLBTQIA people. And I'm going to say something that's probably totally politically incorrect. Okay. I normally say alphabet soup when I'm talking about GLBTQI, because it's so many damn letters. Right. And I never can remember them all. So, when we're talking about the alphabet soup community, and I'm a member of that community. So I use that not to be dismissive, but LGBTQI, well, that's 7 letters. And I think it might be more now. Yeah. So, so it's like right. After 3 letters, it's like whatever. The people who I am in solidarity with, I can't be prophetic about just Black lives and ignore my white trans sisters who get beat up on BART. Mm-hmm. I can't just be prophetic about inner city Black boys when young Black girls who live in Alabama are raped and murdered by their father. Mm-hmm. I can't be prophetic about social justice and know that my neighbor is constantly afraid of being deported because they are an undocumented person who is doing jobs that people with documentation don't want to do. I can't be prophetic about that. And I also can't go unwounded. Dr. Alan Bosak of South Africa, who is, oh my God, this man completely blew my flipping brain. And he said the following, I'll never forget, it was a Monday night. It was a Monday in February. We were in Dallas, Texas at the Samuel Proctor DeWitt Conference for ministers. And he said, when you meet God, God will ask you, where are your wounds? And when you say, I don't have any, God will then reply, was there nothing to fight for? Mm. And I said to myself, this bastard here, I cussed him out in my brain while I was sobbing and crying.
Yep.
And it is so true. We got to have some wounds about some stuff. Otherwise, our ministries, our calling is null and void as far as I'm concerned. If you are not wounded for something that is going to help the common good, then your collar is just that. It will get ring around. Oh, I forgot to take my shirt out the washing machine earlier. I just thought about it. But
it's all that collar talk, right?
All that collar talk. So, if our collars are just places that contain sweat, if we are not willing to stand up and fight for something,
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I've had similar experiences, especially with Bishop Flunder. When we listen to her speak, it's just like, every now and again, the brain goes boom,
She has been such a force of she's one of the women on who I don't just stand on her shoulders. I stand on the top of her head. I stand on her shoulders. I stand on the shoulders of Valerie Bridgman. I stand on the shoulders of Katie Cannon. I stand on the shoulders of Mother Miller. You know, who Mother Miller who sings. And I tell it's like, as a Black Baptist by birth. I like that, as a Black Baptist by birth. I'm gonna use that. That'll preach. I grew up with the Hawkinses, and so Shirley Miller's voice and her ministry is one of the things that helped get me saved. Bishop Yvette Flunder helped keep me saved. And people and other gospel people maintain my salvation on a daily basis. So I when you say Yvette Flunder and the ministry of justice that she has, she's just absolutely brilliant on so many levels. It's scary how brilliant she is. And it's also inspirational to see that a Black woman, a queer Black woman, come out of a religious background that has said women are not equal. And not only show herself to be equal, but surpass her male counterparts, gives me, with a Y chromosome, a little bit of hope that this queer little boy who grew up in Oxon Hill, Maryland, might actually have something to say that people would want to listen to, and who might be able to change one small corner of the world.
Well, even me, I mean, I'm a white, Wiccan Christian fat woman, and
with orange hair, with
orange hair at this right this second. But even with me, being at Refuge, and I did my internship there for PSR, and and learning from her and learning from the other members of the church. I've learned so much about inclusion that, I'm bringing that into the pagan community, and inclusion is hard. Being able to be inclusive and giving and trying to work for that justice, to keep that inclusion, to make that inclusion happen, to be radically inclusive is difficult. It's not an easy thing to do.
At all.
I mean, especially towards the people that are doing you harm. And I think, I want to go back to what you're saying, how you're seeing both sides and having this discussion with your pastor, because, I see that too. I see both sides. Like, I have a friend of mine whose whole family have been cops for generations. And it's like, yes, I understand there are cops that are good. I have met some of them, but there are cops that are bad. I've met some of them too. And the thing is, I'm not saying that, every cop is bad, or every cop is corrupt. It's the system is broken. The police have been militarized. The system itself has always been broken, and always, putting people of color away more than white people, period. I mean, that's just statistical fact. You just got to look at the statistics, and that's what you can see. So it's kind of like, how do we embrace radical inclusion in trying to explain why this is broken and why the protests are happening and why we have to say Black Lives Matter?
I'm so glad that this is going to be an excellent flipping segue.
Thank you.
So I told you that earlier on, that we're having this conversation on Dr. Carey's wall, and someone just said to me, and with all due respect to you, Guy S. Johnson, so I'm already pissed off.
Oh, there we go.
Because number one, as a white man, for you to say all due respect, that means that you don't have any. Maybe you should look into the stats of how many cops or people in power kill Black men and compare that to how many Black men kill other Black men. That is not the
that's not the point.
And for a white man to tell me what I need to focus on when he says cops or people of power killing Black men is way down the list of problems plaguing the Black community. That right there, a white man telling me what I need to focus on in my community is the essence of what the problem is.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this puppy down for like a minute
Okay.
before I throw it across the wall and start screaming like a fucking banshee, because it's things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to me that someone who does not live in my community, who doesn't understand what it is to be profiled from the time you walk to your door. When I open my door, I'm automatically profiled if the police walk up to my door. Mm-hmm. For someone who doesn't understand it to tell me what I need to focus on in my community is an insult. Mm-hmm. It is the highest. It is one of the greatest insults that I have ever heard. Mm-hmm. And then to start whenever I know. Okay, so I'm going to say something that's really, really tacky, but it's so true. I don't know why certain white men think that because they have a penis, because that's not what I wanted to say. It gives them more brain power. No, the little head just sucks blood from the big head, you ninny. It's that.
Yeah. For me, I'm a white woman. No matter how much I can empathize, no matter how much I can show compassion, no matter how much I can try and do my best for social justice, I will never truly ever understand what it is to be a Black person or any person of color, regardless, because I am not a person of color. I will never understand this completely. And, you know, and that's true with other marginalized groups too. You know, like I love my wife dearly, and I can empathize with her, and I know what, you know, I know she's a transgendered woman, and I know that, you know, there's issues with that, and I see what happens when, you know, she's just out and about in the world, but I will never truly ever completely understand what it's like to be a transgendered woman, because I am not one.
Exactly. So one of my mentors is the head of a reproductive rights organization. A man, and he's like, I'm the biggest. He's like, I'm more abortion oriented than most women I know, which I think is hilarious. Mm-hmm. And I often say, I don't get into conversations about choice issues because I never have to make that choice. The moment I can start to carry a baby, then I get to have an opinion about that. It is unfair for me to tell a woman what she can or cannot do with her body, because I've never had to be in the position where I have to carry another life inside of mine. Mm-hmm. I have no concept as to what that looks like. I can't even fathom how a life grows inside of you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I liken that to white men telling Black men what it feels like to be marginalized in society. There was it's been a year, maybe two ago, a political commentator, I want to say for Fox News, said that it was around the time of the immigration, the latest immigration wars in Arizona, and he said, "My white skin and red hair are my passport. Mm-hmm. You would never understand what it's like to be a minority in this country as long as you've got white skin." And that's a conversation that I have to have continually at church, because some of my congregants will say, "Well, I know what it is to be discriminated against. I had long hair at one time, and I would get pulled over by the police all the time." Mm. And I said, and the moment you cut your hair and you put on a suit, you became a vice president in a company. I cut my hair and put on a suit. I'm still a Negro with a suit on and a nice haircut.
Right.
You know, so it's more than just, it's just so much more. And it's just so much more.
Yeah. And it's not so, like, you know, I've seen a lot of discussion about, well, Michael Brown should have been more respectful. And it's like, you don't understand. It doesn't matter. It doesn't necessarily matter if, you know, because the problem is that the discrimination's there, and they have the power. And no matter how respectful a person of color can be, doesn't necessarily mean that things are going to change in the situation.
So there, Michael Brown, number one, I don't care what he stole.
Right.
I don't care what he said. I don't care. I don't care what he stole, what he said. And the more the story, the older the story gets, and the more it takes on life. I don't care what the now non-charged police officer says.
Right.
The moment that he dehumanized Michael Brown and then executed him in the street, a state-sanctioned execution without trial, without conviction. That baby was executed on the street without a trial.
Right.
I don't care what he stole. Stealing is not a death penalty offense.
Right.
Selling loose cigarettes on a street corner is not a death penalty offense.
No.
Getting your wallet after a cop tells you to get your wallet, it is not a shootable offense.
Absolutely.
Being on the subway in one of the most liberal cities in America and being killed by the police is not an executable offense. See, that's what people don't, and I think that's what a lot of people are missing. They go into this, well, the police are we want them to come home safely. I want every officer to go home safely every night. I do. Mm-hmm. I want my pastor's husband to come home every damn night, because if he doesn't, then I got to drive the 50 miles to their house and hold his hand while he's in mourning.
Yeah.
I want him to come home, because then I got to put on my sackcloth and ashes and wail and be simple too. I'm not covering my mirrors. I'm too pretty for that. I'm not doing all that. I want every police officer to come home, but I also want my 14-year-old nephew, 15. No, he's 15. Oh my God, my nephew's 15. my nephew is autistic, and he lives in Augusta, Georgia. He's autistic. He's 15. He lives in Augusta, Georgia, and he's going to be built like my daddy. My daddy was a football player. My daddy was 6'2" and weighed 230 pounds. Mm-hmm. So he was not a small man. My aunts were both over 6 feet tall, and one of them, I swear, was a linebacker. I swear she was a linebacker, because she weighed 300 if she weighed a pound. Big old thing. Mm-hmm. I worry about him not understanding social cues,
right,
and interacting with an officer. Last year, an autistic man was killed by police at a theater in Maryland. They said he was charging them and he was combative. And the reason the police were called was because he basically stole a movie. Mm-hmm. He went to one movie, then he went to another one.
Right.
Police were called. Then, things got out of hand. The cops, of course, were not indicted.
Yeah.
I wonder if police are going to give my nephew that much leeway.
And you know what the sad thing is? Knowing the way the system is,
I'm going to say no.
Not. More than likely not. And that's the thing. To be able to say that, to just say that blows my mind. That I don't even have to think about it. You don't even have to think about it. We can say no.
No,
that's scary.
But for me, that's the price of having brown skin living in America. You grow up as a young Black man hearing the police may not be your friend. And the message that you're getting in school and from society is the police are your friend. So if you're in trouble, go to the police. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing police officers saying that Black men between the ages of 15 and 39 are subhuman. I'm hearing that, they are animals. I'm hearing that they are the Incredible Hulk. I'm hearing that they are demonic. I'm hearing that when I look, I believe I heard a cop say, when I looked into his eyes, it was as if he had no soul.
Mm. I remember hearing that. Yeah.
So we are now objectifying in a whole different way Black men in a way where they weren't objectified during slavery.
It's the other. It's
the other. It's the great other. It is the, you know, one of the things that drives me crazy is as much as I hate to admit it, I love sports. It totally goes against my musical theater background.
Oh, I do too.
And I love sports. I mean, I was, I love musical theater. I'm this amalgamation that just makes no sense.
It's all good.
But a couple of years ago, LeBron James was on the cover of, I want to say, Vogue. And I want to say it was whatever the skinny model of the week was. No, I'm not going to say that, but it might have been Heidi Klum. I want to say it was Heidi Klum. And, King James had her wrapped in his arm, and the image immediately evoked King Kong and Fay Wray.
Oh, my. Right. Weird.
So, this 7-foot-tall Black man has this little blonde white woman, and he's holding on to her, and the image is invoking a great ape taking possession of a woman. It plays into every stereotype that Black men want nothing more than to attack and defile our lovely young white flowers. Sound familiar?
Yep, absolutely.
And even if it's not Black, and those Black men who don't want to defile our young, delicate white flowers are looking at our young white boys, them homosexuals is, and, they just want to turn our little white boys out. And I really would like to get to a time when we don't have to have these conversations. I really would. I would like to get to a time when the conversations we're having is we have so much food that no one is ever in need. Mm-hmm. I want to get to a point where when we talk about the hungry, it's so-and-so is hungry because they just decided not to eat enough. Mm-hmm. I want to get to a point where when we talk about people not having housing, it's because, well, they just don't want to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. I want to get to a point when we're talking about healthcare. We don't have to worry about how much the copay is going to cost when you go to the doctor. And it's interesting, all the things I say, I want to get to a point where we don't have to worry about them. Jesus said that you are to feed the hungry, you are to clothe the naked, you are to take care of the sick, you are to visit the poor, you are to house the homeless. That's what we are called to do as Christians.
Yeah.
I don't know much Bible. Let me say that. Okay, that was a wasted lie. Sorry, Mama. I know a whole lot of Bible, and I know that Jesus said, when you don't do those things to your neighbor or for your neighbor, it's as if you did it to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is very interesting that during this season, that we are in the season of Advent, where we are awaiting once again the arrival of the Christ child, the one who is coming. We're waiting on God with us to show up in the flesh, incarnate. I find it really interesting that we are now having these discussions at this time of what would Jesus do, and we are continually doing the direct opposite of what Jesus would do, while we stand in our lily gilded pulpits talking about we are awaiting the arrival of the Christ child, and we light our candles and we sing, "Oh come Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel," and we sing it and we think we mean it, and it turns into what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13. We talk about if I speak with the tongue of men and angels and have not love, I am as a sounding brass or a tingling cymbal. I don't know much Bible. I know that.
Yeah.
I know that if we don't love our neighbors as ourselves, then we ain't doing what Jesus said do. I don't know much Bible.
Are you just gonna say, "Oh, love thy neighbor," and not mean it? Because I've been to places where, they're like, everybody's welcome. And it's like, no, not really.
No. So true story. My partner is white. We are an interracial, intergenerational couple. He is 18 years older than I am. Mm-hmm. So, but he's the pretty one. I'm the smart one. No, actually, I'm the smart one. No, but so I have always lived in two worlds. Always. So full disclosure, Philip Tanner, hey Philip, is who introduced us, and Philip and I went to high school together. Mm-hmm. And I had a crush on him, but that's neither here nor there. So I've always lived in two worlds. Oh God, I've always lived in two worlds. I live in a lower middle class neighborhood, mm-hmm. but I hung out with kids who lived in an upper middle class neighborhood. I went, I was not expected to be as bright as I was. Some of my, no, let me not say that. Many of the people who lived in my neighborhood were not expected to be as successful as people who did not live in our neighborhood who went to the same school.
Right. My high school was a lot like that too.
Right. I lived in the hood, but I spent my weekends doing cultural things that kids from the hood don't do. So I've always lived in two worlds. So my partner and I, Bob and I, we've been together almost 10 years. So in an effort to make our world work, I straddle two worlds. Mm-hmm. And I show up at a church that said all are welcome. And again, I'm the only dot of pepper in the grits. And people are looking at me, and someone actually said to me, I think you're at the wrong church. You want the church down the street.
Oh, wow.
I was like, no, I know where I'm supposed to be. I'm a little smarter than the average Negro. Just a little smarter than that Negro. Mm-hmm. Yes, Master Sam. I know what I was doing. And that was so inappropriate, but so timely, because I know what it is to live in two worlds and not fit in either one of them.
Right.
Because, I have to, the church I serve, again, there is one black member of the church. Hi. Mm-hmm. But if I were to go to a black UCC, I don't fit in there because I live in a white world. Mm-hmm. So while we have this, conceptually, all are welcome, it's wonderful. It looks nice on the marquee. Sounds good in the mission statement. Mm-hmm. Sounds good in the welcome statement, but we don't live it.
Yeah. And living it's hard. It's like I was saying before, that kind of inclusion is really hard. And I don't think people want to, it's the whole thing about, people want the path of least resistance, right?
Of course.
It's easier to be like, well, maybe you might not be welcome here. Maybe. Okay. Instead of being, yes, you are welcome here. How can we help you? How can we be of service to you?
But you know why that is? Because if we are truly welcoming of everyone who comes in the door, there's just a chance that we may have to change. Mm-hmm. We may actually have to look at the stranger in our midst as our brother or our sister. We may actually have to look at the alien in our land as a person, not as a slave. Mm-hmm. Which is radical in itself. The fact that we have to look at people that we have demonized, or we have been told are demonized, or we have been told are less than, as equals, that takes a whole lot of mind shifting and changing.
Absolutely.
And then when you add into the equation God, it becomes calculus too.
Yeah, it's like boom.
Exactly, mind blown. It's gone.
Yeah.
So I challenge churches a lot when they say all are welcome, and I will ask, if I bring my drag queen friend here, mm-hmm. is she going to feel welcome?
Yeah.
And they look at me, you have a drag queen friend? You just told me my answer. Thank you. Or if I go, when I go to a black church, if I bring my partner, are y'all going to look at him like he's crazy? Are y'all going to single him out? Because he going to stick out. big old tall white man. He gonna stick out.
Right,
big old tall white man with gray hair. He gonna stick out.
Right.
Are you going to make him feel self-conscious about being in that space?
Mm-hmm.
So the church that I grew that I did most of my ministry growing in, that was really convoluted. But the church I came out of, that I grew up in, before I moved, because I don't live in the city. I live 30 miles outside of the city. So it's like I live, what's 30 miles east of Oakland? Yeah. I live 30 miles.
Tracy.
Yeah, it's like I live in Tracy.
Yeah.
And so I would be able to get to Oakland in 45 minutes with no traffic on a clear day. And no idiots on the road. Right. So the same thing applies here. We live 30 minutes. Well, we live 35 miles northwest of the city. So it made no sense for me to drive past 174 churches to go to a church every Sunday. But when I still lived in the city, Bob came to church with me one Sunday, and I did not know that I would have to sing this particular Sunday. So we get there. I'm thinking I'm going to be called up to do whatever it is I got to do in service, and I go sit back down. Doesn't work that way. I got to sing. So this is the first time he's ever been to my church. We get a speeding ticket on the way to church. That's a whole racial profiling 101. Cop sees white man, black man in car. Cop pulls us over. Asks us, have we been drinking?
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
But it was a Virginia State trooper. So, and it's interesting. Had I been driving, I'm sure that conversation would have gone totally differently. Because an older white male was driving, he got a ticket because he was speeding. But it went a lot smoother than if I had been driving. I'm sure that if I had been driving, the car would have probably been torn up and we'd still be sitting on the side of the road. But so we get there and I'm like, sweetie, I'm so sorry. I have to sing. Ministry trumps relationship right now. Sorry, I got to do this. And so he's sitting, I can see him from where I'm sitting in the choir. It's a straight shot across the church, and it's a black church. It's a black mega Baptist church. So, all visitors, please stand. And so he looks around and he looks at me and he kind of does, and across the church, humongous church, I'm like, get up. So he stands up and the people look around. A couple people went, huh? And then he sat down and all the people around gave him a hug. Thank you so much for your welcome, blah, blah, blah. And it was because he was not the first white person to be in our church.
Right.
So they understood. So afterwards we went to dinner and he said, I didn't feel out of place. I was like, well, here's why, sweetie. Black churches, for the most part, we gonna accept anybody in. Now, you might not be able to sit in the pulpit, but you can come in. You can be a member. We will feed you. We will love you because we know what it feels like to be rejected. So for the most part, we're going to make you feel welcome. He said, yeah, little old ladies were hugging me. And, I'm funny about people. I'm like, I know you, baby, just suck it. You're going to get hugged. Like, you're going to get hugged. Just suck it up, buttercup. You're going to get hugged.
Yep.
So I say that was a long way around to say, all are welcome looks really good on a marquee. Sounds really good in a mission statement. Looks good on the church website. But when I look at your website and I don't see a single person of color, and you have people of color that live in the metropolitan area, that live in the neighborhood where your church is, all are not welcome. All are welcome who look like you.
Right.
And that's a problem. The most segregated hour in America is still 11 o'clock Sunday morning.
Yep. And it's hard trying to be inclusive starting a church because, I know for myself, I've experienced a lot of that kind of, well, I don't know about you because you are a Wiccan Christian and I don't know about that whole thing. And, and I was, I've recently had experiences where, HR said all are welcome here, but no, not really. And it was sad, and it was disappointing, but it was kind of like, there's a part of me that was like, yeah, I'm not that surprised. But it's also hard on the other end because I want to be inclusive and I try to stay, I try to make sure that my website really does that. And I try to be that way. But I also have to admit that, I can make mistakes, and that, unfortunately, we have no people of color in the church because there's only really 3 of us leading the church and 3 of us in the church. So, it's kind of, it's difficult starting and trying to be inclusive and trying to get that word out when we can't really reflect it at the moment because there's not enough of us.
Well, okay. So what I always tell people is when you say you want to be inclusive, invite the people that you say you want to show up at your church. Invite those people. If you say, we want, this is horrible. If you say we want more people of color, then invite some people of color.
Yeah.
And don't just invite them on a cursor, on a superficial, we want you to come just so you can come basis. Hospitality is difficult.
It is.
And so I attended the Lancaster Seminary. It's a German Reformed seminary, but, like all things United Church of Christ, and I love the UCC, it wants to be all things to all people. And sometimes trying to be all things to all people means that you're nothing to anybody.
Right.
They say we want to include everybody. We want to be more inclusive, blah, 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 blah. But when as a Black Baptist, I'm Baptist born, Baptist bred, I will be Baptist when I'm dead. I am Baptist in my sanctified soul.
Right.
Thank you, Jesus. Oh, I just felt that thing. That'll preach.
That's right.
I am Baptist down in my DNA. And when I say that as a preacher as the preacher of the day, I need to hear a song that reflects my heritage. And you look at me crazy, you don't want me there. You want my money, but you don't want me.
Right.
And I liken that to being in a church that wants to pimp me for my gift, but doesn't want my body.
Right.
Or they want this part of my body, but they don't want that part. They want the nice public, they want the neutered guy. They don't want the guy who is in relationship with another man.
Right.
Or it's really easy to pimp somebody out and not realizing you're doing it. It's really easy to do that and not even understand that you're doing it. And those of us who are minority do it as well and don't realize it. We will pimp folks, and then when we're called on it, say, but I can't be pimping them. I am a fill in the blank. No, boo boo. If you are using them and taking their money and not respecting them in the process, maybe that's what pimps do.
Well, as my wise teacher, Elizabeth Ann Jefferson. Ann Jefferson, she's at PSR. She works there, but she's also a pastor at Refuge. And one of the she's one of my mentors. And one of the things that she said to me when I was going through this with her is that even the margins have margins.
Yes,
and it's been the thing. I know I kind of I say it a lot to a lot of people, but it's like one of the wisest things I've ever heard. And it's just like, you know what? That's absolutely right.
It is. It's funny. We talk all margins. The margins have margins. The canon has a canon. It's to go back to it's amazing that the conversations that I'm now having are with people who say, I believe the whole Bible. I'm like, really?
Yep.
Really, but you believe the whole
Really?
Bible.
Really?
The whole and I actually said, and look, so listeners, you can't see my face, but again, the whole Bible. You believe the whole.
I think I've had that look a few times myself. Like, really?
And then I say, all right, then. You really believe the whole Bible? So you truly believe that disrespectful children should be stoned? Well, that was for that culture then, but maybe that's part of the whole Bible. So you believe that when a woman is raped, she should have to marry her rapist? Well, no, that's that. You know, they didn't
Not that.
understand. Oh, well, okay. I'll give you that. So you believe that we should not eat pork or shellfish? Well, you know, I like bacon, and bacon ain't really pork, baby. It comes from a pig. It's pork.
Right.
I swear for God,
I've heard that too.
You know? And I guarantee you that you are not going to turn down the all-you-can-eat crab legs at Joe's Crab Shack on Thursday, or the all-you-can-eat butterfly shrimp. So, you know, and then and the one that really gets him is, so you really believe that we should do tampon checks on Sunday?
Mm.
And they look at me and they go, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, the Bible says that women who are bleeding are unclean and they are not allowed in the temple.
Mm.
They have to be set apart, you know, and they go, the Bible doesn't say that. Oh, but it does. Mm-hmm. Let me refer you to a story that you know, the story of David and Bathsheba. You know, Bathsheba was on her roof purifying herself after her monthly period, which is why she was on the roof. David was Shekavan where he shouldn't have been Shekavan. He should have been out at battle, but he was at home looking at another woman, looking at somebody else's wife while she was purifying herself because she couldn't go in the temple.
Yep.
So are you in favor of tampon checks?
Yeah, you want to try it?
Do you? That's the better question. Do you want to try it? And so, and when you start talking to people on a real time, real life, practical application, they think of it like, well, maybe I don't believe the whole Bible. And I followed up with, I am not saying that the Bible does not have truth in it. Mm-hmm. But what I am saying is, if you tell me you believe the whole Bible, then your poly-cotton shirts have got to go. Mm-hmm. They gotta go. You like turducken? You can't have that no more. Mm-hmm. You like cheeseburgers? You can't have that no more. And when you start talking to people about this is what you say you believe this, but you do that, either you don't believe what you say you believe or you're a hypocrite. Either way. Either you need to change what you're saying or change what you're doing. One of the two has got to change. Mm-hmm. Because you are now a house divided, and a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Yep.
I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I got enough common sense to know that you can't tell me you believe one thing and do something else and think I'm supposed to believe you.
Absolutely. Well, we are out of time.
No.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. But, if people would like to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Well, I'm not going to call myself a social media whore. I will say that you're a whore. I love saying it that way because just saying it that way takes so much of the sting out of it. The whore. On Facebook, I can be reached at my name, Guy S. Johnson. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty accessible on Twitter. My handle is at GSJ612. Mm-hmm. If you go to my website, it's www.guysjohnson.com. Mm-hmm. I am so vain that, yes, I named my website after myself. And if you're ever in the Washington metropolitan area on a Sunday, and you want to drive the 30 miles northwest of Frederick, Maryland, I am at the Grace United Church of Christ on East 2nd Street every Sunday at 11 a.m. Or on some Sundays at 4 o'clock p.m. at the Veritas United Church of Christ in Hagerstown, Maryland, mm-hmm. Both pastored by the Reverend Dr. Rob Akbar Taylor, who is amazing. Shout out to Rob. Woo woo. And you know, people can reach me through you. Mm-hmm. And, absolutely. You know, and I am totally up for conversation. You know, I do have some limits. Don't come at me crazy because I don't have but about 2 filters left. I got rid of the other 98 when my mama died. So mm-hmm. I ain't got but 2 good filters left and one of them half the time. So, yeah. But I'm always down for good conversation.
Yeah. And if somebody does post on the blog site, I will forward that to you. So we use Discus, and so we can, you can have the conversation there. Yeah. We also have a forum too. So.
Okay. But and you know, shameless self-promotion. I don't do it often, but I'm gonna do it tonight. I'm more than willing to come preach for you. Just gotta gotta get me there and feed me one good meal.
Right.
Because wherever I show up, I know somebody I can sleep there. But I am more than willing to come and do workshops because honestly, we need to have these. We can't keep having these conversations with the same people leading them. We need some diverse voices, some people who. Jesse and Al can't be the only people who. Jesse, Al, Cornell, and Tavis ain't the only 4 Black people in America.
Right.
I'm sorry, ain't the only 4 Black men in America.
Right.
Who can lead this conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on This Week in Heresy and having the conversation with us.
Well, thank you for letting me be a heretic for an hour. I appreciate it.
Yay!
Heresy rocks.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Guy for joining us this week. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. You can support This Week in Heresy by subscribing to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, join our forums, follow us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast, or financially through Patreon. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.